Hello, and we are doing Making Sense of It today. Uh, this past week has been the Glasser Conference in Missouri, and Sue is here and going to share with us some of the things that she experienced while there, and Sharon will be coming in a little bit to share also about some things that's going on in the Glasser Institute and some new insights that they learned. So, Sue, thank you for agreeing to do this, and take it
You're
away.
welcome. You're welcome. Well, first, just sort of as an overview, it was really very interesting. And now, again, these are my own personal insights. This was the first time that we were together live since the pandemic. And we had a small group of about 45. And personally, I believe the intimacy of the small group helped us to connect more readily. Some of the standouts for me, because we had different types of workshops, and then the board had met for 3 days before. And then we also had a faculty day. So it was really very interesting because there's the business of Gift US, the Glasser Institute for Choice Theory. And there is really the business that we meet once a month normally. But then we also had an opportunity. This is the first time that we've been live. Now, we only had half the board there, but that also, I think because it had been so long that we've been together, that because we were smaller, just made it easier. Because people have learned to deal with life in different ways over the last several years. One of the things that stood out to me was counselors, educators, and how many times somebody was presenting whatever they were presenting. So a counselor was presenting something, and the educators in the room would say, "Oh, we could use that this way." And then educators were presenting something, and the counselors would say, "Oh, we can use it that way." And it was really interesting to see what Dr. Glasser probably had imagined for all of us, the idea that these are concepts that could transfer not just across human life, but across these very specific job opportunities and professions and careers. And it was really interesting because there was a point, you sort of hang out with people who are like you and have similar interests. And we would do that, and people would say things like, "Well, but education, we can't, blah, blah, blah." The counselors would say, "Well, but in counseling, we can't, blah, 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 blah." So great idea for you guys, but we can't. And it was finally at a point where people could say, "Oh," which now brings me to another point.
It's applicable for all.
But how do you tweak it? What else do you do with it? How else will it work? But also what stood out for me as an educator was the process of learning. And when we think about the process of learning, how far we need to come in that process before we're able to, in a sense, analyze it and synthesize it. So if you're just at a basic level, you really say, well, that's good for those types of people. Oh, that's good if you have this kind of personality type. Oh, that's good if, and you may not be at the point yet to generalize it. So I think that people were going, "Oh, but you can, oh, but we're at enough of a synthesis level that they could see how to adapt something." Simultaneously, what I've noticed was the adaptations that people have made to Dr. Glasser's work, but have maintained the essence of it, but have altered some things. But the respect that was still built into it, and where it was acceptable, and where people go, "Yeah, but wait a minute." It was just interesting. Now, again, I was just operating at a more analytical standpoint. But then we had, and I'm looking for the titles of things, and of course we probably all went to different things. And I want to say thank you so much to Mona for helping design, for helping produce our you can't see that if I'm going to be. Can't see it if it's going to not. Okay, let me get rid of that. Okay, there we go. So I was presenting for the board what the program committee has been working on, and Mona did a lovely job of helping me to produce a visual for that, which I of course adapted just because I didn't know how to put it the way she had it. I couldn't figure out how to put it on one sheet. So I was trying to do that, and there was probably an idea, and I probably might have talked to you about it, but somehow or other I just ran out of time and didn't. So I created my own sort of place. One of the workshops, do you want to hear about different workshops, different things that people did?
Sure.
Or overall?
Maybe how it impressed you in a new way.
I guess.
And I'm getting a couple of thumbs up here, so.
All right, go ahead.
But that's what they're wanting also, is for you to present.
I had the opportunity to see Jim Coddington, and he presented using media to create a need satisfying learning environment. And so what he had done is he had found any number of clips, video clips from different TV shows, movies, what have you, that he would use to teach a Glasser concept. So the first one that he showed us, which really stood out to me, was called Something About a Nail. That I just have to find my notes for that. I can't quite remember, but it was about a nail. So here's a client who comes to a counselor and she's got a nail sticking out of her head. And she keeps saying, I'm so uncomfortable. I can't get close to people. And I don't understand what my problem is. And it's just hard. Nobody will hug me. My husband just has stopped getting close to me. And then I have this horrible feeling in my head. It really hurts. And here's the counselor struggling to say, have you thought about the nail in your head? Have you thought about what's getting in your way, without the opportunity to say directly, it's the nail in your head. Take the nail out of your head. It was just the funniest clip. And just really watching as the counselor's going, isn't it obvious you have a nail in your head? And it just really went on that way. It was just hysterical. So it was the best clip. But then people went through and different people shared different clips that they had used. So Jim's ability to enable us to look at different clips, how you might use them, what they were specifically, people really saying, oh, well, what's the title of that one? How do you get this one? And Jim's being so amenable to say, just put your name on this list and I'll send you my list, which was just incredibly sweet. And yet in my head, I'm saying, just Google it and you'll find it. You'll find it yourself. So it was really interesting. So it's about the nail. What's your nail? Anyway, he did a lovely job. He did a great job. And other people had their clips, which he said, would you mind coming up here and finding it? And then he'd be able to share with the group. From that, other things stood out. So for instance, in that same session, I watched Pat Roby get up, and just because she just got up and she altered the lights so people could see the screen, but didn't turn it off. And she just did it naturally, but yet from a technical standpoint, there is a reason we don't turn the lights off completely, because of the brain producing melatonin and, people falling asleep in a movie, so and Pat just did it so naturally. And then people going, oh, I couldn't see it when the light's on completely. And she would just dim the lights according to how dark or light the clip was. So anyway, those were just technical things that I saw, and just new learning, new ways of approaching choice theory, new ways of approaching our questioning process, our reality therapy process. So,
as well as making it comfortable for those that are a little antsy.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That
yeah, I know. I'm going to share. I was having conversations with people because the different ways that people present, the different ways that people, and So those of us who are educators were very, very analytical about when are you instructing? When are you training? When are you allowing people to engage? And who are the people that they would say something and they'd have their workshop and somebody go, and they'd interrupt the whole flow. And then there were other people that just didn't, and how the gentleness of some people who were able to say, please hold your questions until, which way do you want to go? And just the interesting piece of, like, Dr. Glasser was always, he just presented and then he role played and people just went, okay. And we just watched. And the people who were able to do that and nobody interrupted. And yet the other people who would do that and people would be, and they grab the workshop from them. They just take it away. And it was just an interesting play on presentation skills, training, instruction, facilitating. Pat Roby was another one I watched. She started and she said, well, here's what we're going to do today, blah, 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 blah. And then she sat down and she said, can somebody please share yada, 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 yada. And then she just facilitated the whole thing as people were just sharing with somebody who had a concern and how to deal with something. And she just backed off completely. And it was no longer her workshop. It was our workshop. We presented, and there were 4 of us, Sharon being one, and we just held on. It was our workshop. We're sharing information. We're going to give you a chance to share, but we never gave up the workshop. It's like, we have this much stuff and here's other things that you can do. But so just from my background, those were things that I was looking at. So not from a content piece, but from a process piece.
Right. Okay. Okay. Well, thanks very much. And ask Sharon also if she would share some today. And
Thanks.
was a little late in getting my Zoom meeting to come in. So thank everyone for being here. Welcome,
Yeah.
Sharon.
Well, welcome. I'm glad I could make it. I got a couple of things I'll highlight, and perhaps Sue will have thought of some other things by then. Steve Hammond was our keynote speaker on the first morning, and he said a lot of content that I'm not even going to begin to try to summarize, but a couple of key points that he hit that I think are essential. And one, he said, was talking with Dr. Glasser or someone else, and Dr. Glasser replied to sum up his learning, and it was, quit trying to control others. That is the summation of choice theory, isn't it? We can only control ourselves. So I think that's another. And he also made the statement that we all know, but the way he stated it, I think, is distinct. There's no future in the past.
Right.
That just solidifies that whole thing of reality therapy about we work for the present relationship, the present behaviors that we have control over today. We can't control anything from the past, so it was, again, no, you won't find future in the past. And I think, if you turn that into a question, if you're working with someone, can you find your future in your past experiences? Put it in that self-eval type question, I think would be really powerful. And yes.
Right in there with that, since you're talking about the past, I was reading a book the other day of Eric Butterworth, and he was talking about the fact that we need, the statement that it came to pass, but it didn't come to stay.
That's a good one.
Yeah, to keep that in mind. It didn't come to stay because we're always, keep on passing.
Thank you for sharing that. That just adds power to
powerful.
Right. And he did a lot of talk about relationships and the value and the quality of relationships. And when you're starting in a new one, and we don't always have this option, I don't think a whole lot, but if we kind of know what we want from the relationship as we begin it, we're more apt to behave in ways that we can perhaps get that relationship, so whether it's a professional one, a personal one, whatever the relationship, kind of have in mind what you want from that relationship as you begin it. And so it's kind of like you've made your own little plan about moving forward. And of course, as we know, we can always change those plans, type thing. And he sang to us at the end. He had his guitar out and sang to us. It was very awesome. And I had picked up Pat Robies to talk about a little bit too, Sue. That we had one person that came from Toronto, Canada. We had one international attendee, and she was sharing work that she is a counselor, some work she was doing with a particular client. So Pat said that when she was asking about, she said to her, would you role play it with one of us? And so various people would role play with Jeanette, and the styles were dynamic and very, very different, but getting towards the same point. It was really, I wish in some ways we could have had it video, because it showed the different styles people had with the same situation. And so it was just very, very learning that. So.
I'm so glad that Sharon brought Steve up. It was lovely, just so lovely to see him. And some of the things, and I think he started with, here's 6 things I'm going to share with you, or 7 things.
He did.
Or whatever. So I'm not sure I have them all, and I'm not sure, but anyway, what I do have is find a way to express yourself beyond words. He said, for God's sake, don't be petty. Don't be petty. I'm sorry. Don't be petty. Don't be petty. For God's sake, don't be petty. And I may or may not be quoting him. I can't tell you how much I may have paraphrased. Find things to be delighted in. Rest in the mystery. Let it be. The power of forgiveness. And he was talking about our worst enemy and our best friend. And Tom Parrish had added to that, you're my friend, I just don't know your name yet.
I had highlighted that too.
Isn't that lovely? Yeah, that was. Sorry, just going through notes now. It's interesting to see what were the things that we all picked up on. He talked about, Steve Hammond then talked about setting boundaries. And it really is the most important thing we can help children learn to do, which is really interesting, because people hear choice theory and they hear it as so, well, it's all about relationships. So go ahead, do anything you want. You can get your needs met, so we were able to format it and be able to say what Dr. Glasser had taught us is, how do you get your needs met without interfering with other people? How do you do that? We had those kinds of conversations any number of times. So I think that was really important.
It reminds me of my daughter. She was very difficult to discipline, in that nothing was a discipline to her. Because I'd have her, I said, now go sit in the chair for about 10 minutes and think about why I'm having you sit there. And she would, see a little bug on the wall or a little design, and she'd start talking to it. It was just very difficult to discipline someone that always is fulfilling their own need.
Finding the positive in whatever way. Oh, it's nice. I felt like sitting down anyway. Thank you, Mama.
Right, exactly.
Steve also, he said, coming from the educator standpoint, if you can't teach the whole child, what part are you leaving out? Which I found interesting. So sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
We had a general, one of our morning get-togethers with the whole group, and Brian had, we all had arranged for Lynn Samita, who is now the president of WGI, and Denzel Whitbui was also invited. He's the administrative director. Something happened with his time connection. He didn't. But Lynn spoke to us, probably 20 minutes at least, and she really laid out how WGI is working and reorganizing to better meet the needs of the MO or the member organizations, such as we are a member organization, and then every other individual country around the world that is participating. And she's very invitational to wanting to know what the WGI can provide for their member organizations, and they're really working on their committees to meet those needs and reorganize. Then they're struggling with some of the same things. The U.S. organization is struggling too. They need new treasurers, they need new financial managers. They're repositioning a lot of different people. So, I mean, it was good to hear from her and to know how much together we are as an international group. So,
All right.
yeah.
Good point. My freedom need interfered for that one. It became a what time? I've grown very used to not having to actually get my act together to actually be someplace at a given time, which is why sometimes you've seen me here and I'm not visible because I'm not ready yet, So there it became accentuated because, oh my goodness, what do you mean we're starting at 8 o'clock in the morning? Oh my goodness gracious. So it became sort of a joke. So I completely miss Lynn, but I did get her last piece. And the last piece of it was to really, that I heard was to really think about it. What struck me is the theory into practice piece, that we have a theory base and how people are practicing, whether through reality therapy, whether through lead management, whether through organizational management, whatever, through parenting, whatever the application is, that it still rests on the same theory base, and to be able to look at that and to be able to transcend what we're doing. And I saw how many opportunities there were for that and how many people are actually transferring the skills, transferring the ideas. Oh, I can ask these questions of my spouse. Oh, I can ask these questions of my child. Oh, I can ask these questions of the supermarket clerk who can't figure out what to give me, the different ways about it. So that stood out for me, but I'm not really sure, Sharon, because I'm looking forward to hoping that it was videoed and I can actually
Right.
watch
I think
her.
the whole thing was videoed.
Right,
we could-
different segments were videoed, but
Yeah.
not the whole conference
It
wasn't.
was too expensive to be able to pull it together that way. So
I have a few quotes that she said too that I want to add to with what you said.
please.
She said, as the chair is supporting people for win-win, which we all would like that to be. And she says, seeking the common ground in the win-win. So if you're disagreeing, find your common ground and then work towards the win-win. And the statistic she used is we should be spending 60% of our time outward, only 40% like on vision, mission, inward things. So look at what we're doing as an organization and see how much of it is outward, that we're taking the information out to other people, organizations, promoting the information that they have revisited their mission, and it's still very, very similar. Teaching the world choice theory is more about what we're doing. Again, that 60% outward, not the vision inward. So, and their vision is inspiring mental health and emotional well-being, which we would, I think we'd all go. So those were a couple of quotes I had from her.
What is really interesting, just from a perceived world perspective and a values perspective, I would wonder, other people who were at the conference, you're getting, in a sense, when Sharon and I are sharing, understand we have roles within the Gift US organization. So because of that, there are things that we may be listening to that other people didn't hear. Sharon working as the president, me working as an at-large board member, and just the differences in terms of what are people hearing. So just a perceived world idea. What are the what's our knowledge base that we come in with? What's our value system? So other people listening to Lynn Samita may not have heard what Sharon heard, even though she said the same things.
Yeah.
Right, because we have, you hit it on the nail, your perceived world, what is impacting you personally in your activities in your life. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It's not, don't confuse your reality of the perceived world with reality of reality.
Mhm.
Right, right,
Mhm.
right.
Mhm.
Right.
Which also struck me again, because I haven't had the opportunity, I haven't taken the opportunity, I haven't had the opportunity to be in a larger group of learners. You know, all I've been doing is Zoom things. I haven't gone to any courses. I haven't done anything except online. And the difference in live learning with other live learners is really interesting to watch, and the different needs that people have. And I mean, I realize I'm just out of practice. I'm really out of practice that all of a sudden things, I'm used to these, you know, okay, good, we're doing this for 20 minutes. All right, I can handle that. All right, that's fine. Wait a minute, this is 90 minutes worth of stuff. Like, I don't know if I can listen that long. I'm not sure I can do this, you know. And it really was an interesting piece to see how people were processing information, to see what people would be able to do. So I was just looking also then as a learner, but also as someone who had been a professional developer for a number of years. And that was my responsibility, to look at organizing training, to learning opportunities, and the verbiage that we use and the ways that people share that. So that was an aha.
Right. Steve Tracy has developed a plan for growth, and he presented that to people. And they were receptive to it and interested in it. So he's got several steps that he's presenting out. And right now they're more vision than actual steps acting, but they're getting very close to being the actual work. And Lois presented a very interesting lead management workshop, and her first whole part of it was on psychological safety in the workplace. And it was the first time she had done it in an actual workshop, and it was very, very powerful. I don't know, see if I can pick up some. Okay, in order to have the quality leadership, the Deming style of leadership that we work towards, she said, was talking about how the psychological safety has to be important. And that is the people that work within the organization believe that there is no punishment, that they will not be hurt by something they are commenting on, saying, or a step that they might take. They know that it is safe to present various ideas. And they're not going to be put down, hurt, or demoted for just stating their ideas, that they will be considered, and whether acted on or not, that will be, a decision. But it's that safety and trust that you are free to do that. That is the very beginning of it. And another quote was, "I value your perspective and want to hear your thoughts." Mistakes can be seen as challenges. And I've begun to say that a mistake is an opportunity for growth. It's the mistake isn't wrong. It's something that we did, and we learn from it, and we move on. It's not, and then the bottom line is we're in this together. Those were some of her statements. She said a lot more, but that kind of sums up what she was talking about. And she got on down to, after she did it, is to know your why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Understand that if you're a leader and you're doing what you're doing, why are you doing it? Self-evaluate what that why is, and your steps that you're using on that. Let me see.
Just so people know, Sharon's talking, it's Lois DeSelva Napton.
Napton.
That's
Thank you.
her whole, that's Knapton.
Right.
She's from New Hampshire and Connecticut.
Right, right. And one of the things she was saying, she quoted an author, Michael Wright Jr., that inspire you to live your best life. If you understand your why, you'll know what is more important. You can then do your hierarchy of what you need to be doing. So. Okay.
Okay. Well, this has been very informative.
There's a
And-
little bit more. Kim Ulver shared with us.
Right. And Laura Fry, I don't know if you heard Laura's.
Yeah. Laura also. Kim has developed her program process learning opportunity called Mental Freedom. And so just a few things. So given her extended knowledge of Dr. Glasser's work, and the work that she's doing, that she's done as a counselor, as a coach, one of the things that just stood out for me, she thinks about the needs in containers. So if you think about all the different, your 5 containers, and thinking about how full the container is. So for any number of us, survival, our container is already full. We don't need to do very much. But then we watched what happened during the pandemic. All of a sudden, survival became a little less full. Some of it was dripping out. And what else did we do to fill the container? So the container may change in terms of how full it is, how empty it is, and how full do you need it to be. So it's just an interesting metaphor to look at it in terms of actual containers. So that really stood out for me, that there's
Right.
different size containers.
Right. I was actually taught the needs that way years
Interesting.
ago. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's Pete's pathogram too.
It
Yes.
is, right. And it's just, it's a different way of looking at it. I learned it from her a number of years ago when I went through her coaching training, but and I shared that with people, but yet it just came back to say, and I don't know whether Maria or Rose, or I believe that's Dave that's on there, whether they've seen it in that particular manner. She also asked and it's interesting because Dr. Glasser has the basic needs as genetic in nature. She started to ask, which are genetically high? Which are genetically less high? Which are genetically lower? So it's just, again, a different frame, a different way to look at which are ones that the container's full, that they're not high right now. And yet for others, they're very high. And I think that was something we could look at the different people who were there and the things that they were facing, the things that they had tried to bracket and put aside, given what was going on at home, given what other things were happening in their lives. That, all right, I'm going to pay attention. I'm here and I can almost put everything aside, but I really can't. I have to leave my cell phone right here. And how many children do we have that we work with? How many clients do we have that we work with? That, gee, give me your full attention. Maybe, maybe not. So it's just an interesting piece.
Mhm. Yeah.
Kim also gave us the unconditional trust challenge.
Right.
Stop treating people to be what you want them to be. Trust them for who they are. Until at a later time. Like, I'm trusting you to be, I'm going to trust you. Like Sharon could look and say, okay, Sue, I'm going to trust you to be late until you do finally work out a way to be on time. It's like, okay.
Right. It was our perception of the person. Are we trusting them based on our perception of the person, or are we trusting them as the person? It was interesting.
Yeah, and maybe what they could do as opposed to what they are doing.
Possibly, yes, definitely.
The other one that she said that really struck me was when we talk about a sweetheart having broken our heart, you know, or a situation that's broken our heart. She said, no, it's broken our expectations. The person didn't break our individual heart. Because of our expectations, they behave differently, and we're learning to cope with it. So it's just a different way of looking at it, which was very lovely.
It brings it back to the internal control about, you know, not being a victim.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have
Okay, well,
compassion. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, I was just going to close this out. And
Okay,
thank you
perfect.
very much for this, and continue looking through your notes, and we may want to do it another time on some of the things that you could bring up. So we're going to close out for now and thank everyone for being here. And then we will open the lines for chit chat. So thank
Perfect.
you.